We have about 5 minutes before we're going to go to questions from the audience, and there are two big areas that we haven't touched on at all, really, and I'd like to get them in a little bit. One is sound, which hasn't had the same digital revolution as picture. So what should people be aware of in sound workflows?
It was just first.
Sound came first. Sound had the
I know what you
digital
mean,
revolution
but you're
well
still,
before
it's still
picture
analog
did.
microphones, they still have to go out and make sound, record sound effects.
I'll have you know that the sensor on every single digital camera is an analog device. It is an analog device, and then it goes through an A to D conversion. That sound actually, because the amount of data that's involved in creating a piece of sound versus creating an image, even at a lower resolution, sound is much, much smaller. It encapsulates fewer frequencies of change. And so sound actually is, the sound editing, sound processing, all that work got digital well before.
Once it's recorded and once you have the data.
And that's all this. I would say that we are in a world, now you have sound recorders that are built into microphones. You have actual record devices that are recorders primarily, and oh, by the way, they have stereoscopic sound for three-dimensional audio built in, because why not? It's just a little extra part that's stuck on it. So I'm not actually concerned on that level, in that sound actually leads the way because it's cheaper too.
And sound is up to 20K now.
Yeah.
One guy laughed at that.
That's making me feel old. Okay.
So basically, you're talking about basically the same issues in terms of managing your data, protecting your data, except the files are smaller, so you will not have a technician on set downloading for hours if you oversample.
Yeah, sound.
That moves much more quickly.
Yeah.
The issues that used to cause a lot of trouble related to sound often sync was something that if metadata wasn't managed correctly, it could cause problems in post if we had to manually sync. It's much harder now to make those mistakes, but it's still possible.
Oh, I still have once.
Yeah,
at least
I was going to say,
every couple months.
it's
I got
still
time
possible.
memo.
But if you're managing your reference data, your timecode metadata, fortunately, sound, we don't get.
Yeah, I would say
too
the
many surprises in
biggest
sound area.
thing to do for sound is always make sure, and as long as the conversation happens beforehand, it won't be a pain in the butt for the cameraman or the sound guy on set, but just make sure in some way, shape, or form that a bit of the work that the sound guy is doing physically somehow makes it onto the data that is recorded on the camera. First they should just have matching time code, because if you're not in there, you're about 30 years behind. But it's also that there are ways to get, even if it's just a scratch track, or if it's just a single file thing that just gets over, some way that the camera is recording a bit of audio that can be used to match out, just to keep track of stuff. It saves a world of time in post, and it's ridiculously easy to make happen on set.
But there's always a problem day one. I don't know about you. In the last number of jobs I've done, unless we actually hire the sound guys for a day to come to the camera prep and do a proper test and send a sync test all the way through the workflow, every job on day one, there's some kind of panic that night in dailies where some time code didn't sync up.
Well, I usually have a little bit of prep time for sound, and we have the conversations with everybody, beforehand, whether they're being paid for that prep time or not. Yeah. But you can't start to have, there's all of these frame rates and all these things are too difficult. It's not like the old days where everything was one way. There's a lot of different ways that things are being done, so you have to have all those conversations before day one. If you start having them on day one, your first few days are going to be bumpy.
And include sound. Yeah.
And absolutely.
Include sound if you're going to do tests,
I'm working on a
record
movie
some
right
sound
now
as
that's a musical, so that means not only our sound people, but all of our music people are included in those conversations. Our music supervisor, the music producer, every single person was involved in those conversations early before we got started, so that on day one, we didn't have any bumps.
And the boom operator that I was 20 years ago will say one thing: is just, I think, be mindful of your sound recordist as well. I think, obviously, we put a lot of focus into making sure that the shot is correct, but I think there is almost always a way to capture good sound, capture good performance, and that, I don't know, as a producer, maybe you can tell me that matters.
you're not going to like this, but in the end of the day, if there's a movie that plays really well dramatically and some of the pictures less than perfect, the film will still work. If the sound does not work, the film is dead.
I agree with this entirely. And I could also say to the boom thing, like I'm on a show now, a Netflix show, that shoots, 2 cameras all the time, 3 cameras a lot of the time. The directors always want to do a wide and a tight, which is the combination that screws the boom guy the most. Or gal. Last season, the directors, it just kind of became, you could just run the wires. We want to shoot it like that. Forget the boom, let's do it on wires. This year, Post has said they want the boom sound. They're willing to pay to paint out booms on the lockoffs. So we will have that wide camera, even if it's a handheld thing. We'll make that a lockoff. We'll have Post is willing to put in the money to.
It's actually not even that expensive to take things out anymore. Quite
Just
honestly.
Roll 5, clap the slate, lock off the camera, count to 3. That's your plate. Do it on every take. Then the boom dips in. A lot of strategizing if the camera's going to move when the boom pulls out, and now that's the new plate. Put it back in.